OpenAI just changed something fundamental about how ChatGPT works, and they buried it in a policy update most people will never read. Not a blog post, not a press conference. A terms of service revision dropped quietly, designed to be ignored. And if you're using ChatGPT right now, well, for work, for research, for anything personal, what changed affects you directly. So, before you type another message into that chat box, give me the next few minutes, because once you understand what happened, you won't look at this tool the same way again. Let me break down exactly what this update does, because the language they used is designed to sound harmless. OpenAI recently revised how it handles user data, memory features, and model training consent. 3 things that, on the surface, sound like back-end plumbing. But pull back the curtain and the picture looks very different. The memory feature, the one that lets ChatGPT remember things about you across conversations, has been quietly expanded in scope. It no longer just stores preferences like, I prefer bullet points, or I'm a vegetarian. According to a detailed breakdown by Zach Whitaker at TechCrunch, the memory system can now retain contextual inferences, meaning ChatGPT isn't just storing what you tell it, it's storing conclusions it draws about you, your stress levels, your financial situation, your relationship status, things you never explicitly said, but that the model inferred from the way you asked questions. Here's what that looks like in practice. You ask ChatGPT to help you draft a message to your landlord about a rent dispute. The model doesn't just remember you had a rent dispute. It infers you may be under financial stress, stores that inference, and uses it to shape future responses. You ask it to help you write a resignation letter. It doesn't just file away that you changed jobs. It builds a profile of your career trajectory, your emotional state, your professional instability. OpenAI researcher and independent auditor Rishi Bomasani, affiliated with Stanford's Center for Research on Foundation Models, has publicly noted that inference-based memory represents a qualitatively different privacy risk than simple preference storage. His words, not mine. The model knowing what you told it is one thing. And it doesn't stop there. The update also modified the default opt-in status for model training data. Previously, free tier users were contributing conversation data to model training unless they actively opted out, a setting buried 4 menus deep in your account. That was already a problem, but the new update changes the language around what opting out actually means. According to the revised terms, opting out of training data use no longer guarantees your conversations are excluded from what OpenAI calls aggregate behavioral analysis, a new category that wasn't defined in previous terms. The Electronic Frontier Foundation flagged this language shift in a detailed post, describing it as a deliberate obfuscation of user rights. Think about what this means for you. You opted out, you did the right thing, and now you're operating under a new set of rules you never agreed to, using language that's vague enough to mean almost anything. The real-world impact of this isn't hypothetical. Think about the conversations you've had with ChatGPT, your business ideas, your health questions, your legal concerns, your relationship problems. You probably typed those things because it felt private, like talking to a tool, not broadcasting to a corporation. What you're actually doing under these new terms is feeding a data system that can infer, categorize, and retain conclusions about you indefinitely, with no clear deletion timeline and no plain language explanation of where those inferences go. Here's the part OpenAI doesn't put in the press release. This update isn't about improving your experience, it's about improving their balance sheet. OpenAI is burning through cash at a rate that's now a matter of public record. The Wall Street Journal reported in late 2024 that the company was spending over $5 billion annually on compute, and operations, while revenue, though growing, still hadn't closed that gap. The pivot to memory, to behavioral profiling, to richer user data, this is the monetization roadmap. Your data isn't the product they're selling today, but it is the asset they're building towards selling tomorrow. This is how it always works with these platforms. They introduce a feature. That sounds useful. And memory genuinely is useful. I'm not going to pretend it isn't. Then they expand it incrementally, each update slightly broader than the last, each term's revision slightly vaguer than the previous one. Before you realize it, the tool you signed up for has become something fundamentally different. It's like agreeing to let a contractor install a security camera on your front porch, and 2 years later discovering there are cameras in every room, all feeding back to the contractor's server, and the clause allowing it was on page 47 of the original agreement. The frustration here isn't just about privacy in the abstract, it's about consent. When did you agree to inference-based profiling? When did you agree to aggregate behavioral analysis? You didn't. Not explicitly, not clearly, not in language any reasonable person would understand without a law degree, and that's deliberate. Simon McGarr, a technology rights lawyer based in Dublin who has consulted on GDPR enforcement cases, put it plainly in a recent interview. The goal of vague consent language is to maximize data collection while minimizing legal exposure. If users understood exactly what they were agreeing to, the consent rate would be close to zero. You might have felt like something was off every time you saw another vague update notification and clicked, "I agree," without reading it. You were right to feel that way. So let's talk about what you can actually control, because you have more options than OpenAI wants you to think. The first thing you need to do today, not next week, is audit your memory settings. Open ChatGPT, go to your profile icon, click Settings, then navigate to Personalization. You'll find a memory toggle. Turn it off completely. But here's the EOS part most guides skip. Turning off memory doesn't delete what's already been stored. You need to go one step further. In the same personalization section, look for Manage Memory. Click that, and you'll see everything ChatGPT has already retained about you. Go through it. Delete everything. This takes about 3 minutes, and it's worth every second. Once you've done that, memory is disabled, and the existing profile is wiped. That's layer 1. Layer 2 is your training data opt-out. And you need to verify it's still active under the new terms, because the update may have reset certain defaults. Go back to Settings, click Data Controls, and look for Improve the Model. For everyone. This is the toggle that controls whether your conversations are used for training. Make sure it's off. Now here's the nuance. As I mentioned earlier, opting out of this doesn't necessarily exclude you from aggregate behavioral analysis under the new language. OpenAI hasn't provided a separate toggle for that category. The closest protection is to simply use ChatGPT less for anything personally sensitive, which leads to layer 3. Layer 3 is compartmentalization. Think of it as using different tools for different types of conversations. For general productivity tasks, summarizing documents, formatting emails, writing code, ChatGPT is fine. The risk profile for that kind of usage is low. But for anything that touches your health, your finances, your legal situation, your relationships, consider switching to a local AI model instead. Allama is a free open source tool that lets you run large language models entirely on your own machine. Nothing leaves your computer. Nothing gets stored on a server. Nothing gets inferred, retained, or analyzed. Models like Llama 3 and Mistral run surprisingly well on modern consumer hardware. You don't need a data center to make this work. Setup takes about 20 minutes. It costs nothing. And for sensitive conversations, the privacy difference is absolute. Your data doesn't go anywhere because there's nowhere for it to go. Layer 4 is for anyone using ChatGPT through the API or in a business context. OpenAI does offer a zero data retention option for API users, meaning conversation data isn't stored beyond the immediate session. If you're a developer or a business owner integrating ChatGPT into your workflow, this is worth enabling. You'll find it in the API platform settings under data privacy. It doesn't eliminate all risks, but it significantly reduces the data footprint. For enterprise users, Microsoft's Azure OpenAI service offers contractual data protections that the consumer ChatGPT product simply doesn't provide. And if your business is handling sensitive client information, that distinction matters legally, not just ethically. Now, a word on what these steps won't fix. If you've been using ChatGPT for months or years without these protections in place, there's data already collected that you can't fully retrieve or delete. OpenAI's data retention policies aren't fully transparent, and even deleted data may persist in backup systems for an unspecified period. That's standard practice across most cloud services, and OpenAI is no exception. These steps are about protecting your future usage, not erasing your past. For anyone operating in a regulated industry, healthcare, finance, legal, these consumer-level settings are not a substitute for proper compliance review. If you're handling data that falls under HIPAA, GDPR, or similar frameworks, consult your compliance team before using any consumer AI product for anything work-related, regardless of your privacy settings. This isn't just about one company tweaking one product. It's about a pattern that's been building since the moment AI went mainstream. Every major AI platform right now is facing the same pressure. They raised billions on the promise of a product, and now they need to monetize the user base to justify the valuation. The path of least resistance is always data, and the mechanism is always the same: incremental expansion, vague language, default opt-ins, buried settings. OpenAI isn't uniquely villainous here. Google's Gemini, Meta's AI assistant, Microsoft's Copilot, they're all operating variations of the same playbook. The question isn't whether any of these companies is trustworthy in the abstract. The question is whether their business model aligns with your interests. And increasingly, the honest answer is not by default. What you did today, taking 10 minutes to understand what changed and locking down your settings, matters more than it sounds. Not because it makes you completely invisible to data collection. Nothing does that, short of not using the internet, but because you made a conscious choice about your own information instead of letting a corporation make it for you by default. You're the user of these tools, not the product being refined by them. That distinction is worth defending. There are millions of people making these same choices right now. Turning off memory, running local models, reading the terms instead of clicking through them. You're not paranoid for caring about this, you're paying attention. And in an era where the default settings are written by people whose interests don't match yours, paying attention is the most powerful thing you can do. If this gave you something useful, subscribe. I cover these shifts the moment they happen, not 3 weeks later when it's already everywhere. And drop a comment. Are you sticking with ChatGPT after this, switching to local models, or something else entirely? I read every single one.